So good morning, everybody. Great pleasure to welcome you in the session today on our free Frogeex Green Tech Lives. Today, it's my great pleasure to also welcome Dr. Hans Friederich with us. Welcome.
Hello, Jana. Very nice to be with you.
Hans, it's a great pleasure to have you on the call today. Today we have a discussion or a conversation about nature-based development. Now you have a lot of intersections in your long professional career with, first of all, conservation, nature conservation, bamboo as well, and intertwined with sustainable tourism. So this will be a little bit like the points which we will discuss in the session today. I encourage everybody that is watching the streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube to share their observations, comments, or whatever would be interesting for you to learn from Hans, or to kind of understand the perspective that he's involved and immersed in for many, many years. Just drop us a comment so we can tackle that either in the session or later in the comments after the call. Now, just let me give you a little bit of an intro on the extensive profile and background of Hans. So we made a little research over here. It was really, really long. So just maybe some few elements around, where Dr. Friederich or Hans is coming from. And it's, it's quite apparent he has a large, extensive career in terms of nature and sustainability, spanning over 4 decades across different regions in Africa, Asia, and Europe. He was engaging with local and national governments, international organizations, and global initiatives. Highly recommend. Maybe we can also drop your profile after the session so people can really kind of go back and also click the follow button to kind of, receive the information that you share on the topics that you work with still. And in this professional path and journey, Dr. Friederich was previously also engaged as a Director General for the International Bamboo and Rattan organization. He's also an international member of the China Council for International Cooperation, Environment and Development. And since 2019, he's also a senior advisor to Bamboo Logic based in Europe. Now, he has also many different areas that are, as mentioned before, connected to environment, tourism, nature-based development. And in this capacity, he's also a contributing expert on the tourism panel on climate change, which is a kind of driving force behind, science-based climate action in the global tourism sector. So quite interesting, quite important nowadays as a sector itself. He's also engaged in the academic field at the University of Arts in Arnhem. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly. He's a part of the board of advisors for the Bamboo Europe research project, focusing on developing sustainable bamboo value chains in Europe. And he's also a vital link between Life Terra Foundation and Bamboo Logic, promoting tree planting as a cost-effective nature-based solution to combat climate change. So there are many, many other roles which are kind of, flowing into your profile, your expertise, your perspectives. And today we also already indicated nature-based development is our kind of, bottom line, the red line of this. Now, it basically opens up a little bit like the intro. Why is nature-based development important for you, and what role does it play in the aspects that you work with?
Well, thank you, Jana. That all sounds incredibly impressive.
Your background.
I guess, as you say, I've had many, many years working around the world on truly sustainable development issues. And I guess for me, sustainable development really is that interface between, on the one hand, let's say nature conservation, and on the other hand, the economic development that we need in order to get ahead. And I guess my realization is that if you don't work with nature, that economic development is simply not going to work. And therefore, really, nature-based solutions are really an example or an expression of working with nature rather than destroying nature or exploiting nature. So it's really looking at the benefits that nature brings to actually promote truly sustainable development, and development that's good for the planet, good for people, and certainly also development that's economically viable. So it's really, looking at how we can actually embrace nature rather than destroying it or working against it, which is so often has been the case in the past.
Yeah, understand. Definitely hear you. Now, when we talk about nature-based development, are there certain techniques or methods which you find particularly useful, or kind of a part of a tool set that one can apply?
Mhm.
How would you approach that?
Well, I guess to say that there are particularly sets. There are many ways you can work with nature. Maybe one thing is to give an example. I won't talk about bamboo yet, but one thing that struck during the tsunami in Asia in 2004 is that the coastline where the mangroves had been cut was damaged more heavily. More people lost their property, more people died because the waves of the tsunami hit the coast without any buffering. Mangroves basically create a buffer. It doesn't stop flooding, it doesn't stop the waves coming onto the land, but it means that the force is drastically reduced. And therefore, in those places where the mangroves were still healthy, very few people actually lost their life, and very few people really lost their houses. They might have been flooded, but that's it. Those places where the mangroves had been cut, the force of the waves basically destroyed whatever was there, including loss of life. So really, that's an example of where mangroves were cut in the past, often for fisheries production, shrimp farms, which is a fairly short-term economic development without thinking of the value. And the engineers in first instance would say, well, let's build something with concrete, but a tsunami will knock out concrete. So actually working with I would almost say traditional hard infrastructure is not as effective as rebuilding the natural defenses that that mangroves provide. On top of that, mangroves, of course, are fisheries, breeding grounds. They are what local communities use sometimes for firewood as well. They have lots of other economic and social benefits. So in fact, a very healthy mangrove forest has an enormous amount of benefits and is economically incredibly important, both for local livelihoods and for fisheries, and therefore for economic development even at the national level. So that to me is a classic example of how you can work with nature to promote socioeconomic development.
Absolutely, absolutely. See what you mean, and looking at or hearing what you're saying, it resonates with me in terms of resilience, building resilience for cities, for communities, etc. So, and also you made a beautiful bridge, and at Frogeex as a network of professionals and solution providers all around sustainable building and living. We talk a lot about building. You mentioned built environment, the great infrastructure, and how efficient or inefficient it can be, and how we can enhance our resilience when using or applying nature-based developments or methods. So for you, what is the vision of communities, maybe on the coastal areas, or maybe even more inland? What is the vision? Where do you see the built infrastructure and the nature-based solutions kind of merging or fusing? What is the vision?
I guess there's never a silver bullet, and you should never say no to anything. I mean, I think development again has to be in tandem. There are places where a concrete bridge may be the best solution, a tarmac road may be the way forward, rather than something that is not actually developed with modern technology. But as I just said earlier, there are ways that you can use nature to actually bolster it or to even make the situation more applicable. So I guess it's a combination of looking at how you can work with nature, and that means looking at nature as a for example, for coastal communities, as a way to drain the land during high rain and flooding, but at the same time to hold fresh water during drought periods. Again, very often we've drained swamps, we've drained some of the coastal areas to build houses, and when there then is either high rainfall or floods because of coastal influx, the houses get flooded, and people are really surprised about that. This is something, again, if you look at what nature actually did maybe 50 years ago, and you build that into your planning, you can be much more sure that what you plan actually will stand and will survive. And I think that's one of the real serious issues at the moment, even inland. This whole discussion about the rain that is not necessarily coming in more in higher volumes, but it's coming in shorter periods of more intensity. That's what climate change does. Basically gives you high intense events that causes flooding, and very often the flooding means that river plains or flood banks are actually underwater when they've been developed by urban planning that didn't really look at nature when they made the plans, often on the computer screen. You find that again you're working against nature. If you work with nature, the concept that I think was developed in China, and a lot of people talking about sponge cities, actually looking at how you can recreate lakes in a town, how you can make sure you have a drainage channel that takes away the excess water, making sure that whatever rain is there is actually infiltrating rather than causing damage. Working with nature will provide that. Working against nature is only going to cost more money.
Very, very, very insightful point that you make. Definitely resonates with me. Now, you mentioned also a very interesting word or phrase, never say no to anything. Now, that is resonating with me in terms of technology. We have a lot of digitization trends, a lot of technology. Do you see any applicability for technology and nature-based solutions, a combination, or do you potentially also apply this already using sensors, big data applications for the projects that you are involved in or kind of advise on?
Good question. I'm not that personally involved in AI, for example, but certainly one way that we are using this in our whole discussion about climate-friendly travel, which is basically tourism that is nature positive, tourism that is trying to keep us within the 1.5 degrees warming by being carbon neutral or carbon friendly, and nature that is linked to sustainable development goals. Artificial intelligence can help you to actually identify the right information. Again, you both have to be careful because, of course, AI, if it's not directed, will look for everything. But by creating what we call a folder of information, of relevant information, and then let AI look at those options, you can actually develop approaches that are totally applicable. And that would take you much longer if you had to do it by hand or, let's say, in a traditional way. So I think artificial intelligence and technology can help us to get through the thinking much faster. Whether technology will help you with nature, I don't know. Nature doesn't really need technology. It's the other way around. Technology may need nature.
Yeah, it's always surprising, when you see all these reports. I mean, how is GDP, for example, depending on biodiversity, and then there are some assets, or numbers mentioned of 50%, etc., which I believe was a recent report of one of the major insurance companies. And then it's a little bit surprising, how is the calculation based? I mean, where are the services, the ecosystem services like clean air, water? That is basically every product, every service has a water footprint. So how is the logic coming together? Where are the calculations coming from? So definitely understand your point and see the element.
If I can pick up on that, Jana, one of the big problems is that many of those services are not yet economically worked out. And what is more important, the damage is often not included. The environmental costs, the environmental damage of development is very often neglected or ignored. And I think that's one of the big issues. And as you say, insurance companies are starting to realize that, and banks as well, that if you actually include the kind of damage control and repairs that come after major environmental issues, then all of a sudden the equation changes. Take a case in point, the flooding in Germany, was it 2 years ago? The incredible damage that happened, all of a sudden, unexpected. All of that has to be paid for. And all of a sudden, therefore, if you include that in the discussions about river basin management and how you maintain your slopes, which was always just an environmental issue, not an economic issue, after a disaster like that, all of a sudden it becomes an economic issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. And moreover, what I find really interesting about climate change is also, we have some predictions. We have very good data for 30 years now, different type of reports, kind of, very precisely telling where we are. We are actually ahead of the curve, feeling more, in shorter time. And the question is if we can work with that, if we can work with the unexpected intensity that can be exponential. We don't know how fast, how bad it can get. So I find this also quite fascinating about resilience, preparation, working with nature context, etc.
I think maybe going back to your earlier question about technology, one of the things, as I said, I think the biggest effect of climate change, it's not that the Earth is getting warmer. Yes, it is maybe, but I think the real effects of climate change are this unpredictability, the fact that things happen that may not have happened before, or when they happen faster and they happen more often. Look what's happened in Libya yesterday, I think. Enormous flooding. They haven't had that for many, many years. We were scared here in Malta because the big storm was floating around in the center of the Mediterranean. It almost hit us. It fortunately didn't. It hit Greece first. It hit southeastern Europe and now ended up in Libya. These are events that haven't been predicted, but maybe artificial intelligence or technology in general can actually help us to look at some of these unexpected events where the hurricanes and the typhoons all of a sudden will happen, and how fast they might occur. If they're going to be more severe, is there a way that we can plan ahead, at least move people out of real vulnerable areas? So I think that's, again, something where technology can help us.
Wow, absolutely an insightful point here. Now, just to kind of go back also to the earlier point, which we discussed or touched a little bit in our discussion. You mentioned bamboo. It's quite apparent you have a lot of intersections with bamboo. Why is bamboo important for you? Why is it interesting as a material plant?
There's a lot of things about bamboo. I think what really struck me is when I joined the International Bamboo and Rattan organization as the Director General, which is basically the CEO, I didn't know that much about bamboo. I have to be honest. I mean, I worked, on nature issues all my life, and bamboo was part of that. But I never really thought about bamboo as a particular species, and I should say a group of species. I mean, there's about 1,700 different bamboo species, which people already, not many people realize that it's not one bamboo. It's lots and lots of different bamboos. What basically is the interesting thing about bamboo is that, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, it touches many of them. Bamboo is food. In China, in Asia, and actually in other countries as well, bamboo shoots are eaten. And they're part of a stable for local people in bamboo areas. Bamboo is fodder. Animals eat bamboo leaves. So if a farmer, a poor farmer, has a bamboo grove, he actually has food for himself and food for his cattle. Food for his fish as well. I know fish ponds in India that basically were surviving because there was bamboo growing around the fish ponds, and the leaves fall in the water and the fish eat it. Bamboo is employment. I mean, if you look at how many people in the world are actually working on bamboo, either management, development, maintenance, the manufacturing of goods and products from bamboo, it's millions and millions and millions of people. So it's job creation. It's there for economic development. It's basically a question of money. I remember talking to a woman in Vietnam who said, when I need some money to buy shoes, I cut a pole of bamboo and I sell it. It's my bank account. She literally saw it as her personal bank account that she could tap into when needed, and she could then use and sell and make money. But it's also, bamboo has amazing opportunities, amazing properties to actually hold soil in place. The bamboo roots are very, very strong. They're very, very dense. It's also one of the questions that people have when they talk about invasiveness. But basically, bamboo is very good on soil maintenance, on slope maintenance, I should say, on soil restoration control. So, bamboo is used around the world, I would say, in many countries to stop erosion and to maintain rivers in place. Bamboo actually is a very high biodiversity forest. The giant pandas in China depend on bamboo. The gorillas in the mist in Uganda, Rwanda, DRC depend on bamboo. There are lemurs in Madagascar that depend on bamboo. There are many key species that actually totally depend on bamboo, but there's also other species that use it. So, it's that combination of environmental factors, of social factors, and of economic development, because that's the last thing. Once you cut bamboo, it all of a sudden becomes a product. And that product can be traded. That product is a resource, a raw material for manufacturing of a whole range of things, including construction that you are particularly concerned and interested in. The global value of bamboo at the moment is something in the order of, I think, $60 billion a year, and it grows. And there's an enormous trade between the countries where bamboo grows naturally, mainly in Asia, some in Africa and in Latin America, to other countries, mainly in Europe and the US. So there's an economic aspect to bamboo as well. So it's this combination of socio, environmental, economic that make me really excited about bamboo. A clear example of sustainable development.
Definitely agree. Now, you mentioned also the representation of the key areas where bamboo is coming from. Now we see more and more bamboo also popping up in Europe. We have this European value chain. So with a background in natural conservation, talking about biodiversity, what do you see from the projects tested over here that you can share with us on Europe sourced bamboo?
I think again, for me, bamboo in a way is here in Europe. If you talk about planting bamboo and creating new fields of bamboo, I see it more as agriculture than forestry. And I think it's very important. I would not advocate that we use bamboo in a nature conservation restoration program in the Danube Delta, for example, because we don't know what would happen. We are planting bamboo in Southern Europe. We're starting in Portugal. We're working in Spain. We're thinking about Greece. We're using it as a crop, as an alternative to planting olive trees or almond trees. So it's basically an agricultural development. And therefore, it has all the benefits of environment, socio-economic. The biodiversity aspects will be added. The interesting thing is we actually manage a bamboo field, a small bamboo field in Portugal, which is incredibly rich of both animal and bird life, and has many plants as well. So it's actually a very biodiverse, rich little forest. But the key thing I see in Europe is the economic development linked to the environmental issues of soil restoration and soil cleanup. And that's another very interesting aspect. Of course, bamboo can be used for phytoremediation. We've tested it in a couple of small places, but we're now looking at how we can actually use that also in Europe to clean up some of the agricultural soils that are polluted.
So that
so
is
it's
beautiful.
a combination there.
Please, absolutely. And I find it very interesting, and maybe we can do also a follow-up session, maybe sharing a little bit more details on one of the projects, so we kind of can share transparently information coming straight from the projects. What are the outcomes? What are the impacts? And people kind of see the leverage from having the species, which is many times also a point of concern for many due to, the fast spread of bamboo, or the capacity to grow fast. So
but I think that's something just to point out, Jana. I know people are concerned about invasiveness of bamboo. Invasiveness of bamboo is basically because the roots grow fast. Bamboo does not spread through seed dispersal. It doesn't spread by birds taking the seeds and dropping them here or there, which happens with fruit trees. The growth of bamboo is its roots. Now, in Ethiopia, I was told that is why we want to plant bamboo as much as possible, because we need it to grow as fast. When we are planting bamboo in Portugal, we are planting it at 3-meter intervals. We want those roots to grow because that's the way to actually cover the forest that we're managing. Sure, at the edge of the forest, we have our ways of maintaining and making sure that it doesn't grow any further. But I mean, the invasiveness of bamboo is the expansion of the tree, of the roots system. And that's a different thing than, invasiveness through seed dispersal, which is considered to be the main threat. And I would agree, that is a different issue altogether.
Thank you so much for sharing this. Now, also touching or tapping into your expertise and experience and perspective in the ecotourism segment. Where do you see the context of potentially combining these elements like nature-based development, ecology, ecological tourism? Where do you see this coming together, and what are the kind of basics you see for growing ecotourism or going with ecotourism further?
Sure. I think, tourism in many cases depends on healthy nature. Healthy nature depends on sustainable tourism. I mean, a lot of the tourism that takes place in the world is actually people going to a landscape, going to an area, be that a beach, be that a coastal area, be that mountains. People like to see beautiful landscapes. And of course, they want those landscapes to be clean, to be green, to be healthy. So the two are actually very, very closely linked. I think our main concern, and as the registrar of the Climate Friendly Travel Registry, we're looking particularly at the climate aspect of tourism. And there's two sides to it. Of course, there's an enormous impact of the tourism industry, and most of that is through travel. And one might well argue, well, the travel is an aspect, it's what we call the emissions, scope 3 emissions that you're not directly responsible for if you're managing a tourism outfit. It's the travel world, the aviation and marine transport world that needs to think about how we can actually be really carbon zero. They're talking about it. There's a lot of good action, but it's not going fast enough and it's not going far enough. So we really are trying to push, as it were, that part of the world. What we are doing with the individual tourism outfits, with the hospitality industry, is looking at their emissions. How can we help them to be zero carbon by 2050, which means thinking about halving 2030, which really means thinking about, peaking in the next couple of years. This is what the International Panel of Climate Change advocates. But we're also looking at how climate change affects tourism. And that's, of course, the other side. If you are in a vulnerable area for flooding, for fires, for possibly mountain damage, then again, have you thought about that? What's your resilience? What's your risk? And have you made any plans to deal with that? So it's on the one hand working with the industry to see how we can reduce their impact, and it's on the other hand helping the industry to think about the implications.
I mean, it's a beautiful connection. Definitely, I can only echo that. I mean, we had also, this experience with the heat waves. We have still one now passing through Europe. I'm in Switzerland. We are based in Switzerland. We have still wonderful, peak summer temperatures. So, but can imagine, a little bit further to the south, Greece, Portugal, Spain. They may not be so enchanted, with temperatures around 40, 45 degrees. In a period of, for example, 1 to 2 weeks. So that is something that can influence also a decision to travel to a destination and saying, hey, maybe it's time to choose for a different location this year.
But I think, to be honest, to add one thing, yes, that's important. Our concern at the moment is actually those countries that haven't got the resources. We're working at the moment with the least developed countries in the world. They very often depend on tourism. They very often have some amazing opportunities, both cultural and natural. They were not the ones that created climate change that are responsible for the emissions, but they're often the ones that are actually affected by the climate change impact. So we're trying to work with them and see how we can work with their tourism operators, their tourism industry, and make their tourism more sustainable and climate friendly.
So when we talk about concrete ways how to manage that, first things that comes into my mind is over tourism, or the number of tourists usually going to a certain destination, especially the popular ones. What's your take on that? What's the priority, the perception of this factor?
I think you're quite right that some of the areas, the most popular places for tourism are becoming seriously overcrowded. And the interesting thing is that the destinations therefore are taking action. The Barcelona is starting to look at how they can stop tourism in their center. Amsterdam, the red light area, is basically stopping people coming in. Venice has stopped the cruise ships. So destinations are responding. I think our other suggestion is start thinking about the other months of the year. Most people seem to be traveling in a very short period of the year because that's considered to be the time. Now, of course, this is also linked to school holidays and other aspects, but people that don't have to could travel in other parts of the year when it's actually quieter, when sometimes the temperature are much more clement, and you can still see the culture, you can still see the history, you can still see the sociological aspects of a place, and that would sort of release that pressure during those high season months.
Definitely agree and see the point over there. Now, also maybe to conclude, because we are slightly over time, so maybe just a final call to action. What would you like to maybe share with our audience on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube today? What's happening for you or in your realm?
I guess just to mention a couple of dates. 18th of September is World Bamboo Day. This is a day that is managed by the World Bamboo Organization, of which I'm an ambassador. And basically, we're trying to promote that around the world. We want to think bamboo 365 days a year. But, one day a year we call World Bamboo Day. And there are lots of activities going on around the world by NGOs, by companies, by organizations, by governments as well, to promote the various benefits of bamboo. And I think as far as the climate-friendly travel is concerned, we're actually launching activities in 80 of the least developed countries, I should say 46 least developed countries, and a few others, including Ukraine. We're launching that on World Tourism Day, which is the 27th of September, to start activities in these countries with a local chapter leader that will develop activities.
Exciting news. So definitely let's follow up on that and share some more information also with our community so they can maybe
the information will be shared, especially on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, because many people can utilize it well for their business, for how to get ready, how to prepare, how to adapt. So with this, I would thank you so much, Hans Friederich, for the session today and the opportunity to exchange with you.
Great, Jana. Very nice talking to you. And sorry, we're a couple of minutes over.
No problem. And I see you hopefully on the next one. Thank you so much for your attention and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.